I'm Andy Schmuckler with a better human story. The main idea I want to talk about in this video is the interesting stuff you can get into and discover with the question, would the destruction of a dead planet be any better than the destruction of a living planet? Is the emergence of life better than the failure of life to emerge? Is the whole system of life something of provable, obvious value? Before I get to that question, and why, the only reason you would want to look at that question is because I'll try to show it expands your understanding of our situation, the story of which we are a part. But it's not particularly a fulfilling thing to even have to ask that question. But to get to that question, to get a handle on that question, first I'm going to present in brevity a different idea, which in a sense is good news, which is that value is real. And this can be proven if you look at things in an evolutionary perspective. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. If you're interested in seeing how I can say I can prove it, go to a betterhumanstory.org. But I'll say this much about it. Evolution is always finding strategies for life to move forward. And one of those strategies has been for to select for creatures that experience things in terms of from better to worse. Some things are better in terms of their experience as they experience it, and some are worse. That gets to be correlated with a creature being motivated to do the things that are necessary for survival. So one of the strategies of life has been to create creatures like us humans, but I don't know how far you want to go, but it would appear that the ability to experience things in terms of better and worse goes pretty far into the animal world and maybe also the plant world. I mean, that's one of the questions that's being exposed here about all the things about plants. Do they have experience? But the thing is, experience is one of the products of evolution. Value is one of the is an emergent reality. And a lot of the secular culture of which in our civilization right now has come to the conclusion that because value can't be proven in an objective way, therefore value is not real, that it is subjective. Well, if there's a reality that is necessarily grounded in the experiential, it was going to have to be subjective. So there is no meaningful thing in the universe that can be said to be better or worse until there's a creature whose experience registers as better or worse. With that strategy, life begins to bring value into the world, where just looking things Big Bang, all the billions of years and all that, it does not seem to be animated by any purpose or sense of value. It just seems to happen. The coming together of hydrogen atoms very early on. It's just things happen. And one of the things that happens under some circumstances is that life evolves, and that will mean creating all kinds of strategies to get one's DNA into the future. A major one for creatures like us is the dimension of better or worse. We are motivated to do things that are fulfilling and to avoid doing things that are that hurt, that we don't like, that's negative, that's unpleasant. The positive negative thing is a dimension that emerges in the experiential realm as creatures who can experience things in terms of better and worse, bring value into the world. And that's good news, I believe, because if you look at the implications of all that, you find out some things that really are good news, like value is real, important, and life-serving. And even the sacred can be shown to be a meaningful dimension of things, because it is a meaningful dimension of the experience of the creatures, at least us, and maybe who knows whether any other creatures experience things in terms of, this is sacred. And what could sacred mean? Just like what could value mean? If it wasn't registering in the experience of some creature. We got to look at through the evolutionary perspective to see that, in fact, not only is value real, and not only is the sacred dimension real in a meaningful way that evolution has created in the experiential realm of creatures like us, not only is it real, but it has been selected for because it has served life in terms of how it motivated our ancestors. Anyway, all this can be laid out in a systematic way. Go to betterhumanstory.org. But that leads to the question, if that's what value is it a good thing that on this planet of ours, unlike one assumes Venus, say, that life emerged? I mean, that also is a just happening. I mean, it just happens that if you got the right circumstances, you end up getting some kind of self-replicating something, and on it goes, that whatever is self-replicating gets selected for. And the success in whatever that word was, that process of selection is, what can get us DNA into the future. And that creates an experiential realm. And that's the only place where it could make any sense to talk about value. If there was nothing whatsoever in the whole cosmos that experienced anything as better than anything else, or if there's nothing that even had any experience, what sense could it make to talk about better or worse, good versus evil? But I regard it as good news that, in fact, our being part of that process has actually put us into a drama which is much more meaningful, having moral and spiritual realities, enriching it, and also a way of understanding what the forces have been at work. We are part of a great drama. Because we created civilization, I'm not going to go into how that can be proved. Because we stepped across out of the evolution, the system of life in which we had evolved, extricating ourselves from the niche in which we evolved biologically, by inventing our own way of life, that we took a step and we pitched ourselves into a very meaningful drama about whether the forces of life or the forces of death, the forces of good versus evil, that which is constructive versus destructive. We are engaged in a great war among evolutionary forces, one that has been part of the evolution of life, of value in creating what can perpetuate itself. And another set of forces which is continually operating destructively in the world. Anyway, that's over there, and on other videos, and on my website at betterhumanstory.org. But the question then can be raised, now that we understand that when we're talking about value, we're talking about the dimension of positive experience versus negative experience for creatures that have that dimension in their experience. I mean, I don't know how far down it goes. I mean, do protozoa have negative experiences under some, do they experience? Well, my cat does. It's not just us humans, and it probably goes rather far. So you look at the biosphere, and what evolves as the systems of life for 3.5 billion years before you get to this discontinuity with the breakthrough to civilization, which is breaking out of the biologically evolved system. We've got a sense that value resides in the experience of creatures that have positive and negative experiences, that it can have no other meaning. It would make no sense to talk about value that isn't grounded in terms of positive and negative experience, because that's what brought positive and negative into the world. Motivated to and motivated away from. But then we can look at the whole web of life and ask ourselves, is this a net positive? I mean, there's a lot of suffering out there. I mean, there's prey being torn apart while they're still alive. There are creatures suffering from diseases. There's a lot of nature red in tooth and claw, and there's a lot. If we're going to talk about the balance, then between positive experience and negative experience, what do we know about that? What is that balance? And there, I really I fall down in a way that it's not obvious that this, at least to me, that the system that would be selected for would make sure that the balance between fulfillment and misery in the whole living system was a positive balance. It seems to me that what we know from natural selection makes it possible to prove that there is such a thing as positive value because of creatures like us. Well, that can be, I think, proved in an evolutionary perspective, but I don't know how to prove that the balance of out there in the whole wide world of all of the various life forms living in interaction with each other, is the net experience like those that have the positive and negative experience, are they on balance having more positive than negative experience? And I just don't know how to prove that one way or the other. It seems to me that it would be conceivable that life would take a form in which the costs exceed the benefits. But then I do think I see a reason for optimism that life is indeed a positive. We can take it, first of all, from ourselves. We seem to recognize that life is a plus, not only the way we strive to hold on to it when it's endangered, but we have expressions like in the movies, you'll wish you had never been born. Now, if life were on balance negative, wouldn't most of us rationally wish we'd never been born? I'm a little confused about that. It seems to me that some Eastern religions talk about suffering as being, what life is. So I don't know how to think about that, but I know my own feeling, which is, if I had a choice between going through the whole life thing that I've been going through for 78 years or being spared the ordeal, I would definitely go for it. I would feel deprived if I hadn't had this. And even though, there's been a lot of struggle and more than a little suffering. Uh, and and I think that all the evidence is that we people in general um, are glad to be alive, more so than in pain being alive. Sometimes that seems to fluctuate. I mean, we've got this wave of what's it called? Death by despair, the deaths of despair. Um, so people do sometimes decide that the negative outweighs the positive. But I think that on balance, people want the experience of living a life. But it may vary if in historical times. I've been struck, for example, by how the medieval Christianity world made it such a big deal about suicide, punishable by death. Um, the fact that the Catholic Church made suicide such a major sin seems to me to be suggestive that in that world, the suffering must have been very great. The temptation that people experienced to go to nothing from where they were was so great that the church used all of its moral weight to keep people from taking their own lives. And one of the things about my Better Human Story is that the foundational idea, which is in that book there, The Parable of the Tribes, is that the processes of civilization have made human life very painful in ways which have to do with a force we unwittingly unleashed when we stepped out of the natural order. So, enough on that. But in spite of the fact that the history of human civilization over the last, 5,000 years? Maybe we need to go back 10,000, someplace in between. That maybe the extent of negative experience has increased. In the earliest civilizations, for example, I think it's fair to say that the great majority of human beings in those early empires were enslaved and exploited in some significant ways. So it suggests that civilization may or may not be a net plus. But if it's a net minus, like you got to keep people from committing suicide, maybe that's an artifact not of the way life is, but the way life is in an evolving civilization that's being driven by a destructive force that inevitably emerges if a creature steps out of the niche in which it evolved biologically and creates a new kind of life form, which has been is the fruit of its creative intelligence. The first life form that's not been shaped by natural selection. There are implications to that, and that's the foundation of my Better Human Story, is tracing those. So I think that if we go back away from the injurious aspects of civilization, however great they may be, we can see that instilled in us is a drive to stay alive, that natural selection has given us a relationship about preserving life, which has been advantageous for getting our DNA into the future. And in order to get there, there has to be a motivation for the creature to do that. And that means putting a positive value on life. That I think that we can infer the likelihood in an evolutionary perspective that we have been shaped by the process of natural selection to value those things that perpetuate life. And that includes being driven by placing a positive value on life. And that is best accomplished by making the experience of being alive a net plus. Now, maybe that's true for us humans because we're at the top of the food chain or something. But I think that you can go back and think about, well, what would be, how would you select for the design of a leopard? You would definitely want it to be motivated to do the things that keep its life going and placing a positive value on, etc. I think that this evolutionary process will create creatures that if they get to live their natural life, the net balance is it's a plus. Well, what about the ones that get eaten and such? I can't think it through. I can't prove it. I can't prove that Earth is more valuable than Venus because it's a living planet. Though my feelings about it are that I find this living planet sacred. And that may just be a human process of what living things do all the way up and down the line, which is to have some positive relationship with the world in which they're experiencing what they experience. So as a leap of faith, because I still don't think that I've proven anything, I'm going to bet that the living planet is indeed something of positive value, and that it is meaningfully valid to regard that positive value as something sacred. And that we humans have been structured to be able to relate to all that, so that we are highly motivated to help the systems of life on Earth to survive and thrive, rather than to bring them down on ourselves like we do these days with climate change. We are engaged in a great drama because value is a reality. You can show that out of that there are forces that act like good and evil that are embattled. And the better we see the whole situation, the more we will be connected with our moral and spiritual and loving passions to do the work that's going to be required to make this civilization of ours, which might very well destroy itself in the next not so many generations, to make things whole in the service of life's thriving, human life and the living planet as well. The sacredness that resides in both of those, because there are things that are real, having to do with value, morality, the spiritual dimension that evolution has created. And it's not being objective to ignore that evolution created experiential tendencies in us because they were life-serving, and to look at the implications of that. So I've been trying to do that, and I invite you to take a look at both, the way the destructive force inevitably would get unleashed, and the two coherent forces that emerge out of that drama of life evolving into this point of discontinuity when a creature takes the unprecedented step of getting itself out of the naturally evolved order and creating a new kind of life form that it has invented, but whose interactions are not governed by any order. A new problem for life is anarchy. Evolution stumbles into anarchy when it brings forth a civilization-creating creature. And we are those creatures, and we face a challenge because we are, and it would really behoove us to understand what that challenge is. We've got a job to do in the not so many generations. We aren't much spending time looking at the nature of that job and why it needs to be done. We've reached a point in the evolution of human civilization where the existence of the system is in question. And it compels us to look at things that we haven't looked at adequately before so that we understand the challenge that we face. And that's what I'm trying to do here on A Better Human Story. I hope that you'll check out, if you want to see the drama that we're engaged in, that can actually be inferred by looking at things hard enough in an evolutionary perspective. Please check out my other videos, but more systematically in order to see whether or not the case really gets made. That's in the writings, which is what I spent most of my life doing, is writing, and it's on abetterhumanstory.org. This is available to be checked out, and I feel confident that it holds water. So please subscribe, like, follow, and if you're interested in seeing the drama that we're engaged in as a species, please stick with me and I'll give it the best I've got about showing it.